I'll call to order the November 17th, 2014 Council regular meeting and ask those in the audience who would like to join the Council and I in the Pledge of Allegiance to please stand. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Moving now to audience comments. Citizen comments are an important part of the public process. We take them seriously and factor them into the decisions that we make. Anyone from the public who desires to comment will have the opportunity to do so. When recognized, please use the lectern, speak into the microphone, and state your name, address, and relationship to the city, a resident, property owner, a business owner, or whatever. Please limit your comments to 5 minutes. Submit any written comments that you have to the city clerk. Personal attacks, obscene language, derogatory remarks, and disruptive behavior will not be permitted. If a speaker is out of order, the mayor will direct the speaker to return to his or her seat. If the speaker does not comply, the mayor will ask him or her to leave the council chambers. Again, citizen comments, written and oral, are an important aspect of the public process. The city takes these comments seriously, and we thank members of the public for taking time to address us during meetings. As a reminder, this evening we have a public hearing which will be held after the consent calendar is acted on, and the purpose of that public hearing is to provide an opportunity to speak to Agenda Bill 6920, the 2015 budget. So with that, has anyone signed up to speak this evening?
Yes. First on the list, Bruno Lang at the podium, and if you could speak into the microphone, state your name and your address.
My name is Bruno Lang. I live at 201 Mountain Park Boulevard, Southwest. And I have a few comments that I would like to make. I apologize for not putting a cover letter with my notes that I think all of you have received. My computer went on the blank, and so did my printer. Anyway, the subject matter is rent control. I think you may have had many calls. The mayor, I know, got a lot of calls about the horrible amounts of rent that people have to pay. And I have been a 44 veteran of real estate. And I think I may have something to offer that you may want to consider. In 1997, when Hong Kong reverted back to China, there was an influx of people who got their citizenship, not citizenship, but visa, for $500,000. A lot of money. I mean, billions went into Canada. Now that raised the real estate market substantially. I mean, regular people were buying houses, and when the next batch of Chinese were coming over, they sold them to them and they pocketed the profit. Sometimes they bought them and even sold them to somebody else without having title to them. So that didn't go very well. So in 1997 again, the real estate market was totally destroyed by the money influx. And I have nothing against Chinese or anybody. I love people. I have been in the people business. One of the important things is I love people. And that's what attracts me to the real estate business, because it fulfilled my personal dreams. And I've been retired now for 17 years, living at Vista Ridge Apartments, which is a beautiful apartment complex. We sold our holdings on Mercer Island, where we lived for 25 years. And Vista Ridge, a little tight, but it's a nice, very, very nice and well-kept project. Well, I have had rent, I lived there for 17 years, and I had rent increases every single year. Now, the last one really took the cake, and that's when I dusted off my suit and figured I may be able to help, because decision-making, I was in leadership roles for a national real estate company, local companies, I had my own companies, and leadership, decision-making is part of leadership, as you well know. So I figured, what can I do about it? So I looked at it, researched it, and I found that the solution that BC, British Columbia, our neighbor up north, had was rent control. And I urge you to really consider that, because it's the only way to stop it.
You have 1 minute remaining.
Oh, I'm not even starting yet. I hope you can add a little time to it. But anyway, my last rent increase between 2014 and 15 was 15%. And when people have their hands too deep in in my pocket, I object, and I'm objecting now. So the Attorney General told me to speak in front of you, and hopefully we can do something. And the urgency is for people on fixed incomes, like veterans. I don't care where the income comes from, but they have to live within their income, and even $10 increase to some of them is too much. But to have almost $2,400 per month, that's a lot of money.
Yeah.
So I urge you to consider, you have, I think yes, all of you have a 16-page outline of what I was hoping for.
Yes, thank you. That's time. And they do have the information that you turned in.
Yes.
Thank you. Elizabeth Maupin?
Hello, my name is Elizabeth Maupin. I live at 410 Mount Jupiter Drive, Southwest in Issaquah, and I own property in Issaquah. I'm here because, according to a regional coalition on housing, 38% of renter and owner households in Issaquah are cost-burdened. That means they pay more than they can really afford for housing. People who are paying more than they can afford for housing have to take it from someplace else. Now, some of our people are not in a category where they have a lot of disposable income. That means it comes out of things like the food budget. We have more and more people who are dependent on Issaquah meals for their evening meal. We have more people coming to our food bank. I'd like to just give you kind of a reality check. I'd like to kind of second what the previous speaker was saying to you. Rents go up in Issaquah faster than people's incomes go up. This summer I was approached by a family of 6. One of the adults was a disabled veteran. Those who were working were able to bring in enough that they felt that they could afford $1,200 a month in rent. They needed a place with 4 bedrooms. There is one affordable rent project in Klahani that has spaces for 4 bedrooms, but the minimum wait time is 4 years. The mother who had 2 small children at home really wanted to keep her kids in the Issaquah School District. I looked high and low. The closest place I could find them housing in their price range was Auburn. I've been approached by 2 women, elderly, one of them, well, both of them still working, who can afford $500 a month for housing. I can't find them anything in Issaquah. So we really need to look at ways to keep what affordable housing there is in Issaquah, to keep what we've got from just going up all of the time. And that's basically my pitch. We really need housing that people can afford and still feed their family.
Last on the list, Doug Stalder.
Good evening. My name's Doug Stalder, and my address is 2000 East Quartz Mountain Drive, Ellensburg, Washington. And if you're wondering why I drove so far, it's I am with the Bass family. I'm one of their consultants on their property, and I just wanted to say that Randy wasn't able to make it here tonight, but that we did meet with some of the city staff, the assistant city administrator, and the economic development administrator this week. And it was a fruitful meeting, and I just wanted to state that I was here, and I know y'all are going to go into executive session, and I'll be available outside of that meeting, but if there's any questions that need to be asked. Thank you.
I don't have any more on my list.
Is there anyone else this evening desiring to speak who has not had an opportunity to sign up? Anyone? Ms. March.
Hi, my name's Connie Marsh, and I have a store in town at 1175 Northwest Gilman Boulevard, Suite B11, and also live in town. Mine is sort of short, so I'm going to hop on the bandwagon of not affordable housing, but rental housing in general. I have people come into my store all the time, and they tell me that the rental housing war is sort of a regional war, and they're starting to lease homes sight unseen, and they're bidding up rents now. And so the people who are moving from New York and California are talking to realtors, and they're saying, well, it's renting for $2,500 a month, but I think you have to offer $2,700 a month, and no, you can't take the time to look at it. And they're getting that, and they're having to rent in Auburn even like that. So I didn't know that was happening, but I've had like 3 people in a row tell me about trying to move into our great Puget Sound area and what it's like. So that's just was a surprise for me. So the reason I am here today is to talk about parks impact fees. It's interesting to me that the whole park impact fee scenario and the way we calculate it has been a long conversation. I should say the transportation one. Long conversation. We went through it. They said, this is why we're changing it. This is how we're changing it. These are the opportunities you have on how we want to calculate it. But the parks impact fees just sort of popped up the same way that they've always been without a conversation about, are we talking about parks impact fees appropriately? are we going to be able to use them in our central Issaquah plan to get us the great park system that we need? And so by approving the parked impact fees, which you aren't doing tonight, but you're starting to discuss them, you finally got the information, without discussing whether we are using the right formula, calculation, set of standards to get us great parks, I think is putting the cart in front of the horse. I think it needs to go backwards. Though I was told today it's too late, and there's nothing that makes me crazier than somebody telling me it's too late when the information only came out for the public last week. I mean, yeah, light my hair on fire, just for fun. So I am asking that the council take the policy question in hand and say, well, are we going to get great parks using this formula? Could there be a better formula? And ask for a presentation on some options and opportunities, because we're just transferring forward what we did 7 years ago and saying it's great, but that was before the Central Issaquah plan. I could, of course, go on endlessly, but I'm not gonna, for once. Thanks, bye.
Thank you. Is there anyone else in the audience who desires to speak this evening? Anyone else in the audience desiring to speak? Third and final call. Anyone else desiring to speak? Seeing no one then, audience comments are closed, and we will now move to committee and regional reports, beginning with Councilmember Milligan.
Thank you, Mayor. I have no report.
Councilmember Pauley.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I have one item to report on. Today, the King County Council voted on the King Conservation District's package of new programming and rate change, and they unanimously approved it. I wanted to thank our council for the letter of support that was written. It joined about 60 to 70 other letters of support as well. And I just wanted to read a couple of the comments from the King County Council that came out. Very positive and really kind of sum up how this whole process came together. So it was supported by Dave Up the Grove today, and one of his comments was that the KCD has come a long way in being more responsive to public need, as evidenced by the overwhelming support of SCA. Council Chairman Larry Phillips said it was a new day for the Conservation District and commended KCD for great work that not only encompassed rural communities, but also increased participation and input from the cities represented by SCA, as well as major cities like Seattle. So that really completes a 2-year process for the King Conservation District, and on January 1st, starting out with a new and expanded program of work. As far as the advisory committee goes that I sit on, there will be no December meeting, kind of a celebration of a lot of hard work done to date. And another big part of this is that the advisory committee is now a permanent part of the King Conservation District's governance structure, and will be meeting all next year to assess program success, review program adjustments if necessary, look at new initiatives, and to try and keep this new plan as flexible as possible to address new and emerging needs. So I just wanted to thank everybody for their support for the letter. That's it.
Thank you. Councilmember Martz.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. The Sound Cities Association Public Issues Group, Issues Committee, met on November 12th at Renton City Hall, and there are a couple items in here that I want to discuss with council, but I'm going to save it for the good of the order and go through them at that time and point them out in hopes of a discussion a little bit in more detail at the next council meeting. Thank you.
Thank you. Councilmember Scherer.
Thank you, Mayor, and good evening to members of the viewing public. The Council Infrastructure Committee will meet this Thursday, and that will be at 5:30 p.m. in the Pickering Room of City Hall Northwest. On the agenda is Agenda Bill 6876, dealing with transportation concurrency and impact mitigation fees. That does include park impact fees as well as traffic impact fees. And we also have a discussion scheduled on power reliability service to the city. We will have a discussion of our Complete Streets project list. And finally, action will be taken on Agenda Bill 6886, Level 3 acquisition of TW Telecom. Our subsequent Infrastructure Committee meeting is scheduled for December 2nd. That will be in the Cedar Conference Room of City Hall Northwest. That is a change from our usual meeting time. We're moving that up in the month of December, so that the meeting is Thursday, and then we'll be meeting again on December 2nd. By way of a regional report, the Eastside Transportation Partnership met on last Friday, and we had a presentation from the State Department of Transportation on corridor capacity, particularly with regards to Eastside traffic flow. And there was an interesting comment made about how 2 cars in the carpool lane during peak time doesn't really seem to do much for the lane because it still gets pretty congested. But if you up it to 3, then not as many people are using it, and then the value of the lane goes away. So there seemed to be some movement towards, I'm not quite sure the rationale, but moving towards variable tolling in place of simply a 2 or 3 person carpool for our freeway system. There was also a discussion and presentation that was introduced by Mayor Butler on sound transit long-range planning and preparation for an ST3 transportation package. As you may know, ST3 is an important consideration in Issaquah's future plans, as well as our adopted Central Area Plan process. We had an update on the 2015 legislative session, as well as ETP's draft legislative agenda, which will be coming back to us at our December partnership meeting. We also had a report from the Planning Committee, as well as the Nomination Committee. Pleased to announce that I received the sole nomination to be chair of the partnership next year, and Councilmember Alan Van Ness of Kenmore received the sole nomination for vice chair. But there could be others that could be nominated at our December meeting, so we shall see. And lastly, the King County Council is voting on their adoption of their budget tonight, and it's expected to go through as proposed by their budget committee. There is definitely a concern on the part of the council, especially our East Side council members, Kathy Lambert and Jane Haig, about the gap that the county has in funding and maintenance for rural roads. There is a very, very significant number in terms of what the county has available to spend on rural roads and what needs to be spent in order to keep them up to standard. And so that's a real significant concern, and they're wrestling with ways in which they can really address that very significant infrastructure issue. And that concludes my reports. Thank you.
Thank you. Councilmember Barber.
Thank you, Mayor. I have 2 reports this evening. The first is Services and Safety Committee. We met on the November 6th on Thursday at 5 p.m., and there was 4 items before us that evening. The first was the review of the draft ordinance establishing a salary commission. This was sort of the second time we had walked through this and on the proposed ordinance. Went through the different items, number of members that would be on there, the terms, the membership recruitment, and et cetera. So that will be coming back to the full council on the first meeting in December. The next item we discussed was the 2014 budget amendments. Diane Marcotte, our finance director, was there to sort of walk us through the budget adjustments, and that is on this evening's consent agenda. We also had Diane presented to us the LTGO bonding refinancing, and this is pretty significant for the city. There's an interest savings. We went from 4.26 to 2.6 in regards to the interest savings on this. So we're on 2 bonds. We're looking at about $350,000 in savings. The next issue before us was the Human Service Campus Commission. The Human Services Commission went through the process and granted out about $291,000 to about 42 different agencies. We will have a short presentation on that at regular business. The chair of the committee is with us this evening, and they will be giving us a short presentation. The next I have to speak to is Eastside Fire and Rescue had our November meeting on November 13th. A fairly brief meeting. We tried to keep it to an hour as we had 5 firefighters, new members of our fire team who were going through graduation that night. And the chiefs and the deputy chiefs wanted to make sure they were present at that particular ceremony. We did approve our budget. Part of the approval of the budget was a reduction of $200,000 from the equipment replacement fund. And for the city of Issaquah, that means about $55,000 in savings. Had our updates from the different committees, and as we were adjourning, there was one thing that we brought forward to everybody was that we wanted to have a retreat again in January. So we have not set a date or a time. A couple of things wanting to look at is just simply reviewing all of our committees that we have. We have 3 currently. Do we need them all? That was one of the piece. Also in regards to some wage issues, so that will be set for sometime in January, and I will keep you up to date in regards to when that meeting will be. Thank you.
Thank you. Councilmember Goodman
I have no report.
and Council President Winterstein.
Thank you. I've got 2 regional meetings this week. The board of the Eastside Human Services Forum is meeting on Wednesday, and the King County Consortium Joint Recommendations Committee for Community Development Block Grants is meeting on Thursday. And I'll update everybody on the results of those meetings next time. That's all.
Thank you for the mayor's report. There will not be an executive session held this evening. A reminder that next week, Thanksgiving, the city offices will be closed November 27th and 28th. I'm proclaiming the Hillside Cemetery Port Orford Cedar at 305 West Sunset Way and the Erickson Family Port Orford Cedar in Squaw Valley Park at 10319 Issaquah Hobart Road as heritage trees. The Sound Transit Board hosted a workshop on our long-range and ST3 planning on October the 31st. A couple of things to report from the workshop. The board is still interested in moving towards the potential 2016 ballot measure, but the agency will need to seek new revenue authority from the legislature in order to make that happen. There's interest in seeking enough authority for a major expansion of light rail of about the size of Sound Transit 2, but the exact ask has not yet been defined. Sales tax, MVET, and or property tax are all under consideration, and the board will make decisions on that very soon. And it looks like at the Sound Transit Board meeting this Thursday, there will be some discussion on those potential additional revenue. The next steps would be the adoption of the long-range plan in December. Following that, ST3 system planning would begin in 2015 and be completed in 2015. And the system plan really is the individual projects that would be considered for ST3. And then there would be an effort to seek new revenue authority from the 2015 Washington State Legislature. At the Puget Sound Regional Council Transportation Policy Board meeting this past week, we began crafting legislative recommendations that will be presented to the Executive Board for action. At the top of the list of priorities discussed was the passage of a comprehensive statewide transportation package, the first since 2005, an authority for Sound Transit 3, and options for local government and transit agencies. I'd like to announce the release of the 5th Sustainability City Report that looks like this, and all council members received a copy of it this evening, and it is posted on the city's website. The 2014 report includes an update on the 26 sustainable indicators that measure our community's progress towards long-term sustainability goals. I'm proud to say that Issaquah is making strides to become a better place to live, work, play, and learn. The indicators were developed in 2009 by the Sustainability Sounding Board, and as I said before, the council has received copies of that this evening, and it is on our website. That concludes the mayor's report. Moving now to the consent calendar, I would ask if the accounts payable and payroll for November have been reviewed.
They have.
And with that, then, I would ask your pleasure on the consent calendar. Councilmember Winterstein.
I move that we adopt the consent calendar as presented.
Second?
It's been moved and seconded. All those in favor of approving the consent calendar as submitted signify by saying aye.
Aye.
And those opposed, that carries unanimously. Moving now to the public hearing that I announced earlier. The purpose of the public hearing is a presentation on Agenda Bill 6920, the 2015 budget. The same guidelines for participation that I announced at the beginning of the meeting for audience comments apply here. And we will begin with a short presentation by Diane Marcotte, our Director of Finance. Diane, welcome.
Good evening, Your Honor. Tonight is a public hearing required under state law prior to the adoption of the City of Issaquah's 2015 budget. So we'll run through some of the highlights. The council has met in 5 workshops from October and into November. We also, on our November 3rd council meeting, we had a public hearing on the rates and the revenues expected for the 2015. So tonight we'll be doing a summary of the overall budget. What this budget document does is it provides the city with a balanced budget that continues Issaquah's commitment to quality living through preservation and enhancement of the community's unique human and natural resources. So the council has a set of adopted financial policies that continues to move us towards maintaining these level of services for our community. The budget includes some small increases for our human services providers. It includes a 1% property tax increase over last year's receipt of property tax revenues, and in most cases it maintains our cash reserves at the near current levels. We are using a lot of our fund balances in our capital project funds. We have a number of substantial transportation projects as well as some of our utility projects. And all of them are for those where the council has an adopted policy for a reserve requirement. We continue to meet that reserve requirement. As I just stated, in addition to our transportation and utilities, we have a number of substantial parks. In particular, we will be doing a major rehabilitation and enhancement of our swimming pool. Our pool will be closing in the beginning of December, and we'll be opening up the beginning of June, where we'll have a bright and shiny and improved facility for the community. And we're also embarking on a major implementation of an ERP system. We just started the kickoff meeting last week. This project will be a 2-year project where we'll see substantial changes in how the city operates its internal operations as well as benefits and enhancements to our customers. And this continues to support with the tools, continues to provide the tools needed to the staff to fulfill the city's mission in each of their jobs. The budget document respects the value citizens place on the services that the city provides. We're beginning our ERP system, and it maintains our existing utility rates with the exception of a rate increase, which is a pass-through from King County Metro. The rate increase is $2.24 per month for a residential home. That amount is more when it gets into the commercial accounts, and it's based upon the number of ERU equivalent residential units. The overall budget for the City of Issaquah for 2015, the budget appropriations is $168,651,439. That includes both appropriations for proposed expenditures as well as ending cash reserves. As you can see, the majority of the city's expenditures rest in the general fund. You can see the preponderance in the gold area. That is where we spend typically a considerable amount of our conversation with regards to how the city operates. That's where our police operations, fire, development services, and our parks and recreation programs. The next largest one is our utilities. The operating funds represent 16%, and the capital in those funds represent 9%. And then you can see that we have our smaller funds. Overall, we operate 38 individual funds. Each one of them is managed like a separate business, and we maintain both revenues and expenditures as well as a balance sheet for each one of those funds. So it's sort of like operating 38 businesses within one large corporation. As I stated, the one fund that everybody has a particular interest in is our general fund. Total appropriations is $46,747,053. And as you can see there, the largest expenditure plan for this coming year is our police operations at 20%, Parks and Recreation at 16%, and then our next largest is fire, which includes both fire and emergency management services. You can see we have a lot of other smaller funds that around 1% of our operation, but they're very key operations, including our information technology, our human resources that provides services to our employees, as well as recruitment, support services and systems. That is a newly formed department last year that provides cross-departmental support, administrative support to our operating departments. And then you can see that overall our reserves as a percentage of appropriations, including ending fund balance, is anticipated at 17%. So the revenues that support this operation, primarily in the general fund, 54% of it is taxes. That is the largest resource citywide. Majority of our taxes goes into the general fund. You can see that some of our other is licenses and permits. We have a business license, and we also have a very large, over $2 million that comes from our development services operations that is included in that category. We get some shared revenue with the state of Washington that they share with us, and that includes our liquor profit, our liquor excise, and streamlined sales tax that goes into that category. A very large percentage is charges for services, and that's primarily activity. That is where we're charging a member of the public for a service, whether that's our parks and recreation programs, our jail services, or some of the work that we do in development services. Fines and forfeiture, those are revenue sources associated with our municipal court operation. And then miscellaneous, a lot of that money comes in from some of our rental facilities as well as our interest income. Some of the changes that we're proposing for this budget is a change in our business and occupation tax. The council has had a lot of in-depth discussion on what our current structure is and some of the recommended changes. In the first category, you see our current rates, and we have the various categories in their current rates. In the proposed budget, the rates were increasing for the first four categories by 87%, and the last three categories by 20%. After much discussion, the council is recommending a revised rate of a 50% increase across the board for all of the various categories, and they're shown in the column on the far right-hand side. This action for adoption of the business and occupation tax will be following the public hearing for the council's consideration. We have two other fees that we're looking at implementing. We're looking at establishing a technology fee on all of our development-related activity. We currently have what we call an eGov at 1.3%. The proposed legislation included for council's consideration later on is to increase that fee from 1.3% to 5%. And then also we are recommending the establishment of an out-of-city fee on non-residences participating in the city's Parks and Recreation program. Much of our funding of our Parks and Recreation program is subsidized by our property taxes, and by providing a 20% surcharge on our out-of-city, it helps cover the cost of our operations. And with that, that's a high summary view of a lot of work that this council has done over a series of 5 workshops. And if you have any particular questions, I'd be happy to address them.
Seeing no questions then, we will open the public hearing at 7:40, and I would ask if anyone has signed up to speak.
Yes, I have one. Elizabeth Mopin.
Hello. Elizabeth Maupin, 410 Mount Jupiter Drive, Southwest, Issaquah. I'm here speaking from my position as a member of the East Side Homelessness Advisory Committee on the matter of funding of a regional coalition for housing trust fund. I've already spoken to you about affordable housing and the lack thereof. In dealing with homelessness, it is expensive to fund emergency shelters. They are not well used by the residents of Issaquah. It's like 2 hours to get to the youth shelter by bus. It's about an hour and a half or more to get to the adult shelters by bus. You have to pay for the bus ticket to get there. We have no shelters, no day center in Issaquah itself. So everything that's regional is kind of far for people here. It's less costly to put people into housing. The Regional Coalition on Housing is funded by numerous cities in the area. Some of them have been able to increase what they're giving to the coalition, but other cities have flatlined or reduced what they're giving, but the need keeps increasing. What we give to a regional coalition for housing, they put together with other public funding and private funding and leverage it to create more affordable housing stock. Aside from stopping people from tearing down the affordable housing we already have, the most effective thing we can do is to create housing that people can afford to be in. So there you have my plea. If you want to get a good bang for your buck, please, the Housing Trust Fund. Thank you.
I have no others on the list.
Is there anyone else in the audience desiring to speak this evening who has not signed up? Yes, sir.
My name is Frederick Bell. I live at 5204 Seward Park Avenue South. And as an employee of Eastside, I work for Imagine Housing. I am also very dedicated to the problem of homelessness and the problem that we have of affordable housing on the east side. But first I want to thank you guys so much for funding ARC and programs like that. But I just think that I'm urging you guys to definitely allocate more funds to that, because I work directly with these residents and I see every day that the transition from homelessness and the effect it has on them psychologically and emotionally. And I think that the last speaker brought up a lot of good points, but I think one point really missing is the population that's really most important is the kids. And I work with the kids every day. And I do supportive services for them, and I have a homework club, and I do after-school program with them and have one-on-one tutors, and I do fun activities to build social and emotional learning with them. And I think that in order for these kids to get the support they need, their parents need to be able to afford homes. And I think that it's really important for every child to have a supportive environment. And I think that we have a lack of after-school programming that's affordable for these kids. So, I mean, that's the service that my organization is providing for them. And I think that that's probably the population that really needs it the most. And obviously it's unfair that they don't have, affordable housing because their parents can't afford it, or the rent's just going out of control. So I just think that really this is a problem that needs to be dealt with, and it's just awesome to see the kids every day so excited to learn and excited to grow and to succeed, and it's just hard to see that the parents every day are struggling to pay rent, and even in the affordable housing that we provide. So honestly, I think that this is a problem mostly with the population of the youth in Issaquah. So thank you so much for your time.
Thank you. Is there anyone else in the audience desiring to speak who has not signed up? Mr. Kapler.
David Kapler, 255 Southeast Andrews Street. I want to thank the council for the allocation to the Friends of the Lake Sammamish State Park. It's also a great burden for us in some ways too, because we have to prove that we can really do some things. And one supporting idea to help us on that is there's actually 3 legislative districts, the 41st, the 45th, and the 48th, that actually border Lake Sammamish. The 5th district no longer borders, but the 5th district, which includes most of the residents of Issaquah, has perhaps the greatest potential benefit from improvements to Lake Sammamish State Park. And we're not going to cut down your 2 trees there, Mayor, but Port Orford cedar is one of the most rot-resistant woods there is, and that was the timbers underneath the boardwalk that was built at the state park. So we're working now and trying to get some more docks at the beach. Hopefully they'll get some more Port Orford cedar to construct that.
But
Thank
not
you.
our heritage trees, David. Okay. Is there anyone else in the audience who desires to speak this evening? Yes, sir.
Thank you. My name is Steve Pereira. I live at 170 Northeast Dogwood Street here in Issaquah. Thanks for the opportunity to present. I guess I just wanted to say I'm in favor of the initial proposed tax rates for business and occupation. Not to be against business, but as we strive to be a better Issaquah community in Issaquah, we need both businesses and citizens contributing to that. I'm not against business. I just don't want to exempt businesses from an increased tax rate just because of some idea of that they're job creators. I just think we need to work together, as I've seen various people come before this body and saying things they'd like to see Issaquah become. I've understood there's something of a difference of $1 million a year between the initial proposed tax rate revenue increases and the reduced rates that's been increased, and it seems like that money could be used for any number of good things: improve roads, improve safety. So I'd like to propose that we continue with the initial proposed tax rate. I guess there's a part of me that's old-fashioned. I'd like to see Dairy Gold get exempt from that. I just like driving past their business and driving past their billboard. And I know the margin rates are fairly low on the milk that we buy and the dairy products, where others, businesses maybe seem they can better afford that rate. So I just would speak in favor of the initial revenue rate increase. Thank you.
Thank you. Is there anyone else in the audience desiring to speak? Anyone else in the audience desiring to speak this evening on the 2015 budget? Third and final call. Anyone else desiring to speak? Seeing no one, oh, just in the nick of time.
So my name is Danny Almeida. I am the AmeriCorps members. I also work with Imagine Housing as well as with Fred Bell. And I believe that we should also kind of allocate more of the funds towards the housing. I believe that it's extremely vital for the families to be able to have affordable housing or some sort of affordable unit to be able to live in. Seeing that, going off what Fred was saying, that it is vital for the kids. And it is important that we have like some sort of program as well for them to be able to have an opportunity to succeed. I mean, looking at all the families that I've worked with from Kirkland to here in Issaquah, I've noticed that having affordable housing has been a blessing and an opportunity for them. So allocating more funds and providing more opportunities for the families will be beneficial, as well as it will be beneficial for their children in the long run. I've also noticed that if you allocate these funds towards more of the housing, you'll be able to provide more opportunities for the families themselves by giving them also, by showing that they'll have more support, by getting them services from, at least from what our organization is, we'll be providing services for them in many areas, from like whether it's bus units to the EBC corner to just even holiday gift campaigns to be able to support them. Finding affordable housing for them is vital for the children, and I believe that allocating funds towards housing is extremely vital and will just benefit them in the long run. So honestly, I really do second what Fred Bell is saying, and I do believe that it is important that we bring more funding to the families to be able to have an affordable housing. I believe having a roof on your head is just the most important thing. Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else in the audience desiring to speak? Anyone else desiring to speak? Third and final call. Seeing no one else desiring to speak, the public hearing is closed at 7:50, and we will take action on the budget under regular business. There are a number of other agenda bills that come before that. So moving now to our regular business, the first item is Agenda Bill 6874, Human Services Grant Recommendations for 2015 to 2016. And this is coming back to the council from Services and Safety, Councilmember Barber, and I see some staff signed up for a staff presentation, I believe.
They have. Thank you, Mayor. Yes, Services and Safety did go through this, and we had a marvelous presentation at our last committee meeting from the Human Services Committee Chair, and David Fujimoto was there also, and they're going to walk us through just a real brief presentation this evening. It was very impressive to listen to Bill speak in regards to the process that they went through in the selection of this, and it was a very thorough and thoughtful process. So hopefully they will share some of that with us this evening. Thank you.
Great. Thank you, Councilmember Barber. David Fujimoto, Director of the Office of Sustainability. I'm just going to go through a real quick background and turn over most of our time to Bill Ramos, who's the Chair of the Human Services Commission. I also wanted to note that we have several other members from our commission who are here tonight as well, and to thank them and also the other members of the commission for their hard work on this throughout this year. As Councilmember Barber mentioned, that we are embarking on a new 2-year cycle for human services grants. In the past year, we granted about $288,000, and this next year's proposed budget, this would be going up to $291,000 for the total grants. In terms of the overall process, we had let a application process opened earlier this year. There was also a funders workshop held in March. There were a number of applications that were later received, a total of 57 received in April for just over $441,000. And then since that time, our Human Services Commission has been hard at work through their process of evaluating those proposals to the point where we have the final recommendations here with you tonight. And so Bill Ramos will give a little more depth to that and help explain their detailed process and their thinking behind all of that.
Thank you, Council, for being here, and thank you, members, for being here with me also.
Well, before you start, I just want to take this opportunity to acknowledge the great work that the Human Services Commission did in going through a binder that was about this thick of over 40 different applications for human services funding this year. And the thoroughness in which you did that and the many hours that you put into it. And so I'm delighted to see members of the commission here, and just pass along to the rest of the commission our thanks for a job well done.
Thank you very much for that effort, because it did work hard. It did take a while to sort through that. So to give you a little overview of that, some of this is up here already. Like I say, there was 57 applications, of which 42 were selected for funding, which is about 75%, to give you numbers there. And the $291,000 that we had to divvy up was about 65% of the requested amount of $441,000. So you kind of get a picture there. of these 57 applications, we really did look through them very thoroughly. They have a lot of information there on the program they're providing, as well as their whole program that they provide if they provide other services as well. And many of them we've been funding for a while, but that doesn't guarantee anything. To give you an idea, just a little some of the changes. This year, of those 42, 3 of the agencies were brand new applicants that hadn't been funded by the city of Issaquah before. 4 of them that had applied before were not selected for funding this time. So there was some shift because of looking at the quality and the detail that we looked at. And then there was 10 agencies that just weren't selected for funding that hadn't applied before as well. The commission is really pretty amazing. The folks that come together there have a great wide range of backgrounds, experience, age range from our student commissioners to some a little longer in the tooth. And so we kind of have a good look at some of those things. And when we look at, obviously, the things of the quality of the application and the quality of the work that they provide, we also get more into some of the things you don't maybe think of, but the efficiency of what they do and who they serve. And quite frankly, we have an Issaquah bias. Some of those agencies work only in Issaquah. Some are regional agencies, and they provide service to Issaquah residents as well. And so we're part of maybe a number of cities that are helping contribute to their program. So we look at those kinds of features as well. Small, large agencies work very differently. We consider those things. We also, after all, we look at them across the spectrum. So who are they serving from birth to old age, from crisis to prevention? So how are we getting a balanced approach to all those different areas that need something? And bluntly, we do love to fund prevention. We know prevention dollars are much more effective in the long run in helping things. But at the same time, when you have more of the crisis situation, you have to be able to deal with those as well. So trying to find a balance between those things. And we very much look at their business model, if you will. How are they working? How are they funding things? How are they looking at getting funding for other programs? If they're expanding, how are they really looking to do that, and how those funds are coming? So we really look at them from the service they provide, the business model as well. And just want to mention that for sure that the commission, this recommendation coming to you did come with a unanimous vote. We worked very hard on it. We worked through a lot of things. There was a lot of twists, but at the end, everybody was in agreement. Some of the things that aren't in there, like maybe the whys and the why nots. So some agencies we felt weren't as efficient as others. When we looked at their outputs and their cost, and some agencies overlapped the same types of services. So when we had maybe 3 agencies that did some similar service, how would we, which ones did we fund? We looked at the more efficient ones, the ones that maybe funded a little more towards Issaquah residents. Some weren't local enough, maybe. They provided some service here, but they really were more so other cities and so forth. Some had requirements in their application that we didn't fund them if there wasn't at least $5,000 grant or more. So we took in their considerations. Some were a little bit maybe on the edge of the human services side. There's some things with a lot of people losing budgets nowadays. It's some from the governmental side that are looking at applying that we hadn't seen before. A little of that going on. And we looked at their cost in the detail, even in Issaquah. So like if they applied for a number of cities, so on the regional side, was their cost for the service they provide in Issaquah equal to the cost they provided in a different city? And some was like the cost in Issaquah was a lot higher than maybe the proportion of what they're producing in other cities. So we got into the detail of those kinds of things. Some had, we thought, too high administrative costs. So we looked at those. And then we got down to some tough choices. I mean, really, at the end was we had a group, and then if we end up put someone in, we had to take someone out, or increase a little here, decrease a little there. It just, had to go so far. And those are finally the tough choices of what we did and didn't do. And that's why we brought in I mentioned the 3 new grantees. We felt that they really filled a piece of the spectrum that hadn't been filled before. Their services were something that we didn't have before. And generally, most of the grantees are getting close to what they asked for, because most of them had pretty much a program, so you couldn't just kind of decrease their funding a little bit. So it's usually pretty close to what they asked for. What we don't know is who didn't apply. If there's some services out there needed from agencies that maybe aren't applying. So we have this piece of the puzzle, but we may not have 100% of it, because there's some things happening out there that we kind of have some feelings on, but we're not sure. But we can't fund what we don't get applications for. So that's kind of a quick, large overview. Any questions?
Thank you, Eileen. I don't have a question, but I wanted to support what Councilmember Barber said earlier about our bringing this forward to regular business in a little more detail. Was not some things come to regular business because we should discuss it, and there might be differences of opinion, but the support for your commission is sincere and across the board, and it's just great to hear and share with the public all the work that you've done. When we have our committee meetings, there's so few people in the room, and I hope that the viewing audience is listening to all the work that you've done and the hours over the year that you put in to take care of this very important task. And it was an honor to be in the committee to hear about it, and I'm glad that Councilmember Barber brought it forward in regular business so we could share it with others. Thank you.
Are there other questions? Councilmember Barber?
One comment, then I'd like to make a motion, please. So there's always been a previous policy discussion in which we would like to grant a goal of $10 per capita for this particular agenda bill before us. Tonight's, we will be funding $291,000, 42 different agencies, and it comes in as a $9.06 per capita. So not quite at our goal, but definitely is very good. So I would like to make a motion, please, to approve the Human Service Grant recommendation as presented.
Second.
It's been moved and seconded. Additional questions or discussion? Councilmember Winterstein.
Lots of work, huh? You know, as I've sat in this chair now for 3 years after working with you, and it's amazing how in the area of human services we outsource to volunteers a lot of work. Mm-hmm. We ask people to work with 2-year timelines, not where many others in our community look for 30 years of flexibility and predictability. But human services, it's a really difficult theater in which to operate. So I appreciate the time and that you've put in and the good work. I've looked over your recommendations and wholeheartedly support everything that you did, and the reasoning is very sound. I'm deeply appreciative of that. And now I'm going to issue a challenge. And the two young gentlemen who spoke earlier both talked about affordable housing, and we heard a couple comments about this as well. And we can talk sometime more about what we can do and what we at the city level can affect. But at the federal, the state, and the county levels and regional, there's a lot that goes on related to affordable housing. Our federal agency, the Housing and Urban Development, issues block grants to our states. I'm a member of the Joint Recommendations Committee. It's a King County consortium that makes the allocations to various applications for affordable housing, rapid rehousing, housing finance programs. And it seems to me that would be a natural stage of the growth of our Human Services Commission to branch out and become more informed and participate in the regional issues related to housing, because as those young gentlemen are aware that it's very much a regional issue, as you are as well, there's only so much a single city can do. And of course, yes, we're part of ARCH. We give to the Housing Trust Fund, and that's a good reason. There are many other operatives. There are many other institutions and sources of funds, and I would greatly value going forward to have more consultation available from the Commission on what we do at a regional and perhaps county level and state level regarding to affordable housing. It's something I would gladly spend some more time with you on, because I think it's time that we can raise our voice and become more influential in the region in those areas. Thank you.
Thank you. Other questions or discussions before you act? All those in favor of approving the Human Services Grant recommendations as presented signify by saying aye.
Aye. Aye.
Those opposed? That carries unanimously. Yes, sir.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. And before we continue on with the agenda, I wanted to do a little bit of context setting, not so much for my colleagues here on the council, but for everybody participating and listening in tonight. You know, there are a number of bills that we're going to go through here. That we just went through one for 6874 that pertains to grants for human services agencies and programs as recommended by our Human Services Commission. And if you're wondering, so the 2015 has a single line item for the total amount of the grants. And the agenda bill that we just adopted provides for the details on how that amount is to be shared among the many agency programs. And we have a number of other bills we're going to be considering tonight. The second one pertains to 6899, which pertains to the technology surcharge for services provided to developers by our Development Services Department, or DSD. And to change a fee, to change the fees, a change to Chapter 3.66 of our City Code is required, and that's what Agenda Bill 6899 accomplishes. And the additional funds raised by the new technology fee are included in the charges for services category of revenue in the general fund. We heard about that earlier from Finance Director Diane Marcotte. The third a bill tonight we're going to consider 6905, which pertains to the business and occupation, or B&O tax. B&O tax rates are set by City Code Chapters 504 and 505, hence the separate bill that we have to consider. The funds from the B&O tax flow into the general fund, and the amount forecasted for 2015 are reflected in the budget already. The fourth bill we're going to consider is 6907, which pertains to fees charged to non-residents for programs from our Parks and Recreation Department. Like the others, these fees are established by City Code, this time in Chapter 3.59.020. This bill adds a new subsection for non-resident fees. The money for Parks and Recreation fees is, like the technology fee mentioned earlier, included in the charges for services category of the general fund portion of the budget. And then the fifth bill we're going to consider is 6925, which pertains to property taxes. Property taxes also flow into the general fund. To change the amount of property taxes collected requires the council passing a resolution saying, yes, we really want this increase, and secondarily an ordinance specifying the amount of the increase. And the property tax amount increases is also already reflected in the 2015 budget. And then finally, we're going to consider the actual budget, Agenda Bill 6920. And that has, of course, a lot more to it than what I just mentioned. But these were all related bills. Some of the things we do just in the budget itself, but all of the ones that were mentioned require either an ordinance or special approval, like we just did with the Human Services Grant. So I just wanted to kind of set that context for everybody before we proceeded. Thank you.
And that's very, very helpful, and I'm sure that our viewing audience now have a better idea of what we're going to be doing as we move through the additional 5 agenda bills outlined by Council President Winterstein. So the first of those, Agenda Bill 6899, amending IMC 3.66, technology surcharge, and this is coming back to the full council from Council President Winterstein.
So, as we know, the mayor proposed an increase to the technology fee charged for by the Development Services Department. And the proposal in the agenda bill as written would increase the current percentage that we charge of 1.3%, would raise it to 5.0%. And I guess before I go any further, was there any additional information or planned anything from staff or administration? Okay. So want to mention one thing. As we went through all our budget deliberations, I was reviewing this material this weekend, and it occurred to me that we really hadn't deliberated this particular item. We had some discussion, but I failed to include it in my straw man, in my list of items on, are we in favor of this, or is there some other level or percent increase or percent to charge as a fee? And so I'll leave it up to my colleagues, but I'm very interested in maybe having that conversation tonight during a regular business meeting about having that conversation. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to first, hold on just a minute. I have to open one other file I have here. We were given by the DSD during the budget deliberations a document. You might remember it was called the Technology Surcharge Overview, and it presented a breakdown of programs that would be covered by this 5% increase. Those programs included, and help me here, MPB membership. MPB is
My building permit.
Thank you. Should have remembered. My building permit. So though the document we received didn't have an actual amount for that. We had a kind of a, maybe it's in the text. We had a little blue bar on. You might remember that, and it looks like that costs per year roughly $55,000 a year. Another item it would fund is maintenance for the Trackit system. And Trackit is a packaged application for people to enter in kind of service requests, usually IT or systems related, and it's tracked and it's assigned to somebody, they respond, they resolve the issue. Trackit is just a commercial off-the-shelf package of software. So some more of these fees would cover the Trackit system, and also though it's unclear to me how much it was because I don't have a dollar amount for the maintenance of Trackit. There's also a small portion in here, that's the gold color on the bar we got, for Trackit enhancements. Now we didn't really talk a lot what those were, but some type of, maybe there's a system upgrade or other features that want to be implemented. A very small other portion of what the fees would cover are plan review software fees. Maybe someone else can recall what that was. Hardware maintenance was another category. New hardware for a small amount, for roughly less than $10,000, was another category. Major project reviews, which was about for almost $15,000 of the total amount, and the last part was document scanning. And together, all of these 8 programs for 2015 were estimated to cost roughly $145,000, and the 5% fee charge would cover them all. So the bill as it is currently written, and we don't have a motion on it yet, but the bill and what's already allocated in the budget, that's in the Agenda Bill 6920, that's going to be the last item on our agenda tonight, has the full $145,000 in change allocated in the services area of the general fund revenue. So I was hoping to get a sense from this council whether there was any, like we did during our last deliberation meeting. We had a kind of conversation about, everybody got a chance to comment on their sense of the of a given line item. And this line item I'm asking for your comments relates to the technology fee in this current agenda bill that we're considering. So hopefully that makes sense, and I know you should be pretty familiar with the overall topic. I gave a review, I guess I'll mention one other thing in there. We know that the department did receive a letter from the Master Builders Association that expressed their support for the fee, for how it would improve services that we could then offer to developers and builders. The letter gave an overall general sense of support and then asked us to come kind of closer into where some other cities were, down around 3 and 3.5% rather than the full 5%. Also in the bill or in the packet we received is a table showing that in local nearby jurisdictions, Bothell, Kenmore, Kirkland, Mercer Island, Mill Creek, Renton, Snohomish County, and Snoqualmie all had fees ranging between 1.3, 3, 3.5, or 5% that they were charging. Only Bothell was charging the full 5%. It says Bellevue's charges are built in. I'm not really sure what that means. They don't have a specific line item for technology fee. So anybody want to offer their comments or have any comments to share? Or are we just ready to consider this bill? Nina and then Mary Lou.
Thank you, Paul. I'm glad that we do get a chance to talk with this a little more robustly, though I haven't found anything that alarmed me about it. I have felt in agreement with the administration's plan about the 5%. Any concerns about might that discourage development? Well, what you just said a moment ago, Bothell charges 5% and they don't seem to have any problem with development. But the modernizations that the development department is planning with this and document scanning and other electronic services, I also, not only do I support those being covered by the developers, but I also hope that this may result in cost savings that we can evaluate next year. And it may result in lower costs to the city in the long run, which I sincerely expect and hope. That was all my thoughts. Thank you.
Mary Lou?
Thank you. I had two thoughts on this. One is about outreach and whether or not it was sufficient to the development community or not. The master builders wrote a letter, more or less endorsing it, but asking potentially for a lower fee. However, we're not building a lot of single-family homes, and that's an organization where it represents builders of both multifamily and single-family, but mostly single-family. So I'm wondering if we've really put this out there broad enough yet at this point. The second is, I understand a good portion of it, maybe 3.5 to 3.7%. I understand what you get for that fee. It's when you move into the category of there's other things we'd like to do, like a wish list, and so we're going to put it at 5%. And I'm not saying that's a bad idea. I just have a hard time supporting it at this point. I don't really know what we get for that other 1.5% right now. And also, when a fee goes up, it never comes down. So when we go to 5%, no matter what we're going to do with special projects, once the scanning is done or whatever, that fee does not go down. So it kind of gets lost in the shuffle, and it's 5% forever. So I'd really like to know what we get in a little more detail for that other 1.5%. That's it.
Anybody else have any comments? Josh?
Well, I certainly echo Mary Lou's comment about fees go up and they don't come down, and I've said that mantra repeatedly over the years. By the same token, there are fees and then there are fees. And there are fees for things we need and fees for things we don't. And the way that I look at this is that there's a real tangible benefit and a measurable outcome to this fee. We're not just saying, hey, we're going to tack on 5% and thanks for the money and we'll do something with it, trust us. I think there's really something here that you can put your finger on and you can say we're getting value for that investment. And the particular investment and what I like about this fee is it goes towards the use of technology. And I think that the use of technology on a local level is so important for the future of our city and other municipalities around the state and around the country. We need to embrace what technology can offer. And we happen to be blessed by living in an area of this country where technology is prevalent, and we have the ability to utilize these forms of technology to improve our way of life, to improve processes for businesses, and to look at the types of programs that this 5% will buy, the upgrades, the maintenance, the use of electronic permitting, efficiencies in the process. To me, that is really a worthwhile investment. And so I may not be quite so enamored with other tax and fee increases that we're going to discuss this evening, but with respect to this one in particular, if a motion were made this evening, I would be hard-pressed to find a reason to vote against it.
All right, thank you. Anybody else? Stacy?
Thank you, Paul. During our work session, I stated my concerns with this fee because just a year ago, I think it was, we went through quite a lengthy exercise to increase fees within the department, permitting fees, and those were, in some instances, very, very significant increases. And so here we are again later, looking at another fee increase, and I still am not, I still don't have a clear understanding of not only what the total cost of implementation is of the programs that would be covered by this fee, and because it's a several-year project, there would be program, maybe increases, software upgrades. There are people that need to be hired or retained to do some of this work. And I also don't understand how this fits with the other fees that we have that we increased pretty significantly last year. I just have too many questions at this point to feel comfortable with it.
Thank you. Anybody else? Okay. I'll share my comments that one thing that was fantastic during the entire budget process is that I felt that when we really drilled deep into an issue, we got really good support and supporting information, and we got good detailed answers to our questions. And somehow I felt like this one came up short. And again, I accept some of that responsibility as the person running those meetings. It somehow just fell off my radar, and we were so happy to be done, but we had forgot one. And that is one that, and this is one that we hadn't. So I too share the concern. So even though I can read this material, and I'll go ahead and ask. I don't know if the administration has, in the comments you've heard right now, you have any additional information or any want to respond to anything that's been said this evening. Okay, so I'm not seeing that. So I'm kind of in the place where I appreciate Councilmember Scher's comments about, we know specifically what it's going to, but I have a document that names some things, but the truth of the matter is I don't really know yet. It does say major project reserves, and I don't know about the whole, is it a yearly scanning fee for scanning, or is it something less than that? And so just as a kind of due to that lack of insight, I think sufficient insight. But I understand the fees that we have to pass through or charge for use of my building permit and membership of that. That would be covered if we just charged 2.1% of it. And it looks like if we, I've done some calculation based upon the information that was provided. Like I said earlier, the full 5% accounts for roughly $145,000. Something less than that in the neighborhood of 3.5%, which is somewhere between, it's more than we had, but it's less than they asked for. It would be a reduction of roughly $43,700 and change. So that's a difference. There's a difference between 5 and a 3.5% charge. So I think that, given that I appreciate, having been through the budget process before, I appreciate, hey, let's ask for everything we think we could use and we could need. And I believe that this one requires a little bit more justification than we have received. So having said all that, I'm going to, if I can find my language, I'm going to make a motion and then I'm going to offer an amendment to it as well. I'm going to move to adopt ordinance number
2723.
Ordinance number 2723, amending chapter 366 of the Issaquah Municipal Code relating to permit surcharge for technology.
Second?
It's been moved and seconded. Questions or discussion? Council President Witterstein.
I would like to move to amend the, I'm going to find it here in the ordinance. In the ordinance on page 2 of the ordinance, in the section 3, IMC 3.66.020, authorization of technology surcharge fee. It mentions specifically the city is authorized to charge a technology surcharge fee in the amount of 5% and so on and so forth. I would move to amend this language to change 5% to 3.5%.
So there is a motion to amend the ordinance as described. Is there a second to the amendment?
Second?
The amendment has been moved and seconded. Discussion on the amendment. Councilmember Scheer.
So I guess maybe I'm not clear on the concern about what the additional 1.5% would be going towards, because it seemed pretty clear to me from the materials that were provided during the budget discussions, which is entitled Technology Surcharge Overview, and there's a number of color-coded categories topping out at 5%. And so I guess my question or concern is, if we were to reduce this to 3.5%, not only do we have this $43,000 that was previously assumed in the budget that just goes away now, but what exactly is not going to be done? In other words, is it just the reserves? So we're saying, okay, we're not going to set as much aside for reserves, or are we going to actually have projects that can't get done as a result of scaling back the fee percentage? Where on this line here does the line now get drawn, and what falls off as a result? So that's my question.
Bob, would you like to comment on that, or would you like for me, or do you want to flip a coin? In general terms, if the fee is reduced to 3.5%, we will look at that line, look at those things that we can do, and adjust the work program to reflect the amount and revenue anticipated that we would receive. So that line is not prioritized. The administration will prioritize that line based on projected revenue based on a 3.5% increase in the fee.
Okay, no, thank you, Mayor. I appreciate that. I mean, when I look at what are examples of major projects, and it says document archiving is roughly $150,000, and with a 5% surcharge will take an estimated 5 years to complete. It just strikes me that if you lower that surcharge down to 3.5 or to any number below 5, you're going to now increase the estimated years of completion for a project like that. And that's just one type of project that's listed here amongst many. And it just seems like by reducing the surcharge, we're really cutting ourselves short on our ability to do these very valuable technology-related projects which can improve efficiencies, which can ultimately improve the permitting process for new businesses coming into our community. I just don't see a downside to this particular surcharge.
Without lobbying for or against a 5% or 3.5%, technology is changing. Most of the people that bring plans in these days do it electronically. I believe that when I was on Land and Shore, our former building official brought in a stack of plans when we were talking about the review process, and talked about the importance of digitizing those and doing away with the paper and the cost savings and printing and other things. Technology is going to change over the next 5 years, and there are going to be other things that we will want to incorporate. To my mind, the technology fee provides the opportunity for us to keep pace with technology and make sure that we are applying the latest to be efficient and hopefully to reduce the effort required to go through the process. That sounded like lobbying for the 5%.
Yeah. I think Nina had a comment.
Thank you. Just having started off and then hearing the comments of my fellow council members, I wanted to come back around to respecting the comment said for the 3.5%, being conservative, and indeed when you increase a rate it never does go down. Wouldn't it be great? We could put a sunset on it and then we could remove it after we've done all the document scanning, but it probably wouldn't happen. I appreciate a conservative approach on these costs. Indeed, I do. I could just as easily vote to go with you. We'll see. I've got a couple more minutes before we vote. But I also believe in the investment of technology. And boy, I couldn't add an amendment now, but I can say it on camera and hope that people still remember next year that let's look for the savings that we can earn with a better technology in our development services. One of our largest costs in development services is labor, and that would be something that we could reduce with improved and more robust technology to back them up. So, just,
other comments or questions on the amendment? Council President Winterstein.
Thank you. And going back to the original document that we have, there's the paragraph in there that says, what are reserves for? Reserves help fund future system replacements and upgrades. While no immediate plans are in place to replace Trackit, new technology needs and modules will inevitably come forward and require system overhaul. So I'll stop right there. There's no doubt truth to that comment. But I think we've already established a practice, like when we did by identifying and agreeing to fund the overhaul of the ERP system, that a case was made for a specific system to overhaul, and a plan was put in front of us, and we approved a specific plan rather than first setting aside some reserves and having to do that. So I think that's one component. Another component, as I mentioned in here, it said, while no immediate plans are in place to replace Trackit, yet another portion of that money is identified for Trackit enhancements. So just between those two, a major projects reserve and the Trackit enhancements, again, I don't have actual numbers, but if I eyeball that, that's because it's just a bar on a graph, that's kind of hard to read. That might be, that's probably 12, and that's probably 18. There's probably $30,000 just between those two right there. That's just my guess. So, I mean, I can see those, if I was managing these funds, I would be, operationally, then that would be the first areas that I would look, and I would encourage and ask the administration, to look in those areas.
Other questions or comments before we vote on the amendment? Councilmember Martz?
I think I'm going to be supporting this amendment. I think that in our conversations that we had previously, I think I have a pretty good idea what the 3.5% gets us for now, and I think what I heard is that the administration wouldn't proceed with $140,000 worth of activity this year, but would if we funded less than the full 5%, they would dial it back. So we're not messing with the ending fund balance that we so lovingly got to in our last work session. So if indeed that's the case, then I'll be supporting this amendment.
Other questions or comments before we vote on the amendment? Councilmember Goodman.
So I don't support an increase at all, so I think I vote no on the amendment. That's what I...
Other questions or comments before we vote? Are you ready to vote on the amendment?
One more comment.
Yes, sir.
So if the amendment passes and we adopt the agenda bill as amended, then it would result in $43,700 change less revenue to the general fund. Now, I did some work before coming here and have prepared amendments to the regular budget to account for these lower revenue to the general fund. And so I'm just looking ahead a little bit, is that if we change what's already the 5% to 0 or 3.5, then, but if we change it to 3.5, I have prepared in advance some the necessary changes to the overall budget to help us maintain our policy of expenditures and being covered by revenues in the general fund. So I'm going forward from here. I'm going to support the amendment as the maker of it, and that's believing that we can still achieve a balanced budget without using ending fund balance for appropriations to make up for the shortfall in revenue by changing it down to 3.5%. So, furrowed brow over there.
Yeah, so now I'm confused, because what I thought I heard Bob say was that the city would dial back expenditures on these IT programs if we throttled back this this amount. And
that's actually what I said, and that's what we would do. But what I'm hearing Council President Winterstein say is he has a way to balance the loss of revenue and keep expenditures within revenue in his hip pocket if it's not 5% but 3.5%.
So I love hearing, that they were going to look at their expenses, but what we can do by an act of this body is to pass a budget where the appropriated expenditures are covered by the forecasted revenues. If we reduce the revenues by $43,700 and change, then and go forward with the budget as is written, those expenditures would exceed the planned revenues by $43,700. So is that? So it's great, I mean, and I trust the words, and I'm sure they're heartfelt and would be followed. But I think as a body, I would prefer a practice where we actually pass a budget that adheres to our financial policies.
Okay, but the problem is, I don't think that we're concerned about doing this because we think it's an egregious fee that is going to somehow destroy people's ability to destroy the ability to do business in the city. We're talking about doing this because we're not sure about that package of $140,000 some odd dollars worth of work. So I actually would prefer that they dial the work back, because what the comments tonight have been, it seems like, is that we're not sold on that package, and we're not entirely happy with that package. And we think there's core pieces out of that should absolutely be done, but that we're not all in favor of that whole package. So, right?
Well, I agree. All your points are absolutely germane to the motion and the bill in front of us. Agreed.
Councilmember Scher.
Oh, thank you, Mayor.
I actually appreciated the fact that I did not participate in most of the council work sessions that you did this year, but you did rope me into a portion of one of them. So Councilmember Scher.
Well, I appreciate your participation on this tonight, Mayor, and I'm going to throw a question back to you then on your comment about dialing back, because it relates to the comment here. I look in the budget under the IT department, and I note under charges and services that there's a projected increase of about $30,000 over the 2014 budget for charges and services. It's actually about close to $40,000 over the 2014 estimate. So is that the area in which the administration would reduce correspondingly?
No.
Where can I find in the budget the administration's proposal to reduce by the amount that would be cut by reducing this fee?
Now is probably not the time to talk about it, but we can if you want. There's an amendment to change the 5% to 3.5% to the main motion. And I'd like to stick to that and get that taken care of first, so that, and then we can talk about balancing expenditures and revenue.
Sure. I guess I mean, I'll just be up front. I don't support the amendment, but I'm trying to understand, and I think the council needs to understand the effect of doing that, because if the amendment carries, we are left facing a shortfall when we get to that later item on the 2015 budget. And so I think it's important to understand now, where is this money going to come from? Because I get the sense that maybe the amendment would be supported if we knew, and maybe the amendment wouldn't be supported if we don't. It's sort of like being asked to vote on something and we don't know what happens next.
Councilmember Winterstein?
So one of the things we just learned, like since our last budget meeting, is that, as Councilmember Barber reported during her regional report on EFR, that they reduced the overall expenditure to members for the equipment replacement fund by $200,000, which equates to a $55,000 reduction in our fees to EFR for equipment replacement fund. So there's an offsetting expense, that a lower expense than we were aware of last time we deliberated the budget. So I got that information today, and I was going to prepare an alternative to the budget to use that to offset this reduction in revenue.
I appreciate that. So then I guess to get to Tola's question, in terms of dialing back the work that would be done on technology-related projects, is there an actual budgetary dollar amount savings that would occur in 2015 from dialing back the work on those projects that a 5% fee would fund? In other words, let's say we went with the EFR reduction as a way of offsetting that. Is there going to be an additional offset in the budget somewhere in a line item, wherever, based on the administration's statement that the work would be dialed back? So are we going to end up with
We're
actually
not going to
more?
spend more than we take in.
And that's not the charges and services line? Or it is?
What charges and
I can
services line are we
for
looking at?
IT. For IT.
No.
No.
That's not it.
Okay.
That is to cover IT operations independent of the technology fee.
Okay.
Yeah, and if I may clarify, so these are actually revenues under you'd have to look under the DSD section in charges and fees. And it was covered earlier in the presentation on the general fund in that overall section for services, charges for services and fees. I mentioned earlier in my comments as well, it's the kind of things like park program participation is another one of the line items in that category of revenue. But this one particular is DSD, not IT.
Any other questions or discussions on the amendment? Seeing none, all those in favor of approving the amendment, which would amend the ordinance by changing the 5% fee to 3.5%, signify by saying aye.
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 Those opposed?
Nay.
Nay.
Please, okay. Those in favor, please raise your hands. That is 1, 2, 3. Those opposed? The amendment fails. Back to the original amendment of adopting ordinance number 2723, amending chapter 3.66 of the Issaquah Municipal Code relating to permit surcharge for technology, signify by saying, oh wait, excuse me. Is there discussion on the motion? All those in favor of,
Is that the original motion?
that is the original motion. Of the original motion, signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Those opposed?
Nay.
Those opposed, Councilmember Pauley and Martz and Goodman. The motion carries. Okay, moving now to Agenda Bill 6905, amending IMC 5.04 and 5.05 regarding business and occupation tax. That also is coming from our council president for action.
Okay, thank you. Thank you. So for our viewing audience, we deliberate all of the rest of this already. A lot of time was spent on this topic. I do appreciate earlier in the year, council members Barber and Pauley joined the administration in a committee to take a look at our overall B&O program. A recommendation came forth, and we engaged in a decent dialogue with the community. Though more engagement earlier is always better, I think we got a fair amount. We heard a number of comments during our public hearings, and so during our council deliberations, we settled upon an alteration to the original proposal. Finance Director Marcotte presented them earlier. The original proposal from the mayor had 4 categories: extracting, manufacturing, wholesaling, services, and other, whose current rate was 0.08%. That proposal, the original proposal was to up that to 0.15%, and the council has, in this bill, is written to actually only raise that from 8 to 0.12%. And then the last 3 categories: printing and publishing, retail services, and services and other. Again, as Finance Director Marcotte mentioned, the council had approved in its work session, or gave guidance to the administration in our work session to change the proposed change from 0.0 or 10 100ths of 1% to 12. They had proposed 12 100ths of 1%, and we're recommending 15 100ths of 1%, which is a 50% increase, as it was characterized earlier by again Director Marcotte. So so that is the details, and the numbers from that are reflected in the budget that's later on in Agenda Bill 6920. And I'm sure you're wondering, where did that category extracting come from? Because it was never in any of the material we saw. But and I asked about that, and it turns out there are no businesses in that category, and that's why it wasn't recorded or wasn't brought up with us. So I'm going to make a motion to adopt ordinance number 2724, amending Chapter 5.04 Core Modal Ordinance and 5.05 Administrative Provisions for Business and Occupation Taxes to the Issaquah Municipal Code, amending Section 5.0.050 to increase certain tax rates, amending Section 5.0.100 to make specific exemptions from the tax, amending Section 5.05.050 to increase the thresholds for filing returns and when taxes are due, providing for possible referendum.
Second.
It's been moved and seconded. Questions or discussion? Council President Winterson.
I think this was a really big deal. And what moved me the most was the testimony of the individuals representing the various businesses. I went to both of the open houses that the administration hosted and talked to some representatives of the business community there. We heard testimony here also from representatives of the chamber. I know that some of you had opportunities at other places to talk from some. And one of the themes I picked up on was the original proposal was too much. And okay, that's a real, anybody can say that. I would expect an owner to say, hey, you're raising my expenses, that's too much. That's expected. But what we heard a lot of was, I want to play my part. I understand that. I know that I have a role within this community, and I'm willing to pay my fair share. And the general reaction was, you know, something more than a zero increase, but not too much. I think that we've done a really good job. We've justified it with the calculations and what the change would mean. And I did have an opportunity to brief a couple of members of the business owners from the community since our last meeting, and I got really positive reactions. And those are people who actually testified against the original proposal, and were very they were pleased and thankful that we had made an adjustment and could support what we were doing. So, you know, I think that I'm proud of what we did and really listening. And yet recognizing, as the mayor and the administration had proposed, is that across the board, you know, we have to look to be long-term sustainable and have a long-term sustainable budget to offer the right services at the right level at a fair price to our customers and our business owners. You know, we have to be nimble and we have to develop a sustainable model. And I think this adjustment is part of that long-term solution. So I'm going to support this proposal.
Councilmember Pauley, followed by Councilmember Milligan.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I had a couple of issues with the original proposal, and I guess the first one was that this was our sole business taxing tool that we had available to us. And while it was a difficult year to balance the budget, and the mayor's proposal did a really good job, I wanted to make sure we had tax fairness in here. There are other jurisdictions that use other tools for taxing businesses, and I feel like if we want to come back and look at this again in terms of an increase, we need to evaluate all of the other tools that are out there that other jurisdictions are using and see how we compare and what is the fairest way to spread this tax burden among the business community. The second thing is that we still do not know what the state budget is going to look like, that proposal. And unfortunately, I think we can assume that some of the state shared revenues that we have been receiving will go away. So my guess is that we will be revisiting this again next year, unfortunately, as we try and do a balanced budget for 2016 as well. Those are my two comments.
Councilmember Milligan.
Thank you, Mayor. And thank you, Councilmember Pauley. I couldn't agree with you more. Expecting that we may be revisiting this soon. It is also my objective to have a fair and equitable spread of the obligation that our businesses participate in and the services that are provided in the city to the people who come here to work or who own businesses here. So I do hope that we will explore all the opportunities that are available to us, not just a tax on gross receipts. Because that doesn't seem to cover all of the business activities in the city. Mm-hmm. So I look forward to that conversation as well. I also wanted to bring up my relief that the council was interested in holding the increase to this level. Boy, I had no interest in going to the 1% increase, which would, as I understood, be our statutory limit. Oh my gosh, let's go as high as we can before we have to have the people vote. That didn't make me feel comfortable, and I'm glad that we were able to find a way to do it at a lower rate that seems in keeping with the jurisdictions around us also. But then the other thing I want to come back to next time, I'm not going to say next year when we do, is to spend some thoughtful time with the exemptions. And tonight this is part of what we're voting on, but we didn't really talk about it. We inherited a package or of going with the standard. But anyone can see that it's not our group of exemptions. It includes an exemption for boxing and for horse racing, which we don't have either of those. But we could look at exemptions and see what they really mean. Do they really reduce our revenue in a meaningful way? Do they favor all the businesses that we want to favor, or do they favor too many? Does it not make a fair and equitable spread of the costs of providing services to our business community? So I look forward to that next time, especially if we need to consider any increases in business revenues. Thank you.
Councilmember Marks.
I'm really excited that we came up with this policy. Particularly of interest to me is the fact that it is 50% across the board. I'm an engineer, and manufacturing is near and dear to my heart. I believe that with all the talk of becoming a service economy, I still think that America makes stuff, and I am proud that we have manufacturers in the city, and I am proud that this bill is more fair to them than what we were looking at originally. So I'm very excited today. Thanks.
Councilmember Goodman.
Thank you, Mayor. I also wholeheartely agree with Councilmember Hawley and Milligan regarding the fair and equitable the way that we want to spread taxes and the way we want to look at this. I think for me, that this review was long overdue, and as a result, in my opinion, we ended up with unreasonably low B&O tax rates. It also made it much more difficult to certainly try to get the rates that were initially proposed because they were so much higher than what we had before. And I think we struck a pretty reasonable balance. We're still lower than, as I recall, Bellevue. We're in line with our surrounding cities. And I think I just heard last week at Suburban Cities Association that Renton now for the first time has a B&O tax. So we're just one of almost everyone.
Councilmember Scherer.
Thank you, Mayor. So I agree with the comment about the rate not being increased since 2004, and now's a good time to take a look at this. You know, and I also agree with the comment about revenue sources that cities are going to be facing a reduction in. I think we're going to get hammered by the state's inability to fund programs in the coming years, some of which next year, in my opinion, is caused by an inexplicable inability in Congress to pass the internet sales tax bill, which has a real trickle-down effect to state economies and therefore local economies. You know, I believe, frankly, if you put the 8 of us up here running Congress, we could get a lot more done in this country. But with that being said, on the flip side, I think that the council was, and I said this before, I think we were painted into a corner by the inclusion of this B&O tax increase as an assumed revenue source. And I don't believe that we had any ability to provide policy guidance on it in advance of our budget deliberations. At least I didn't. I do support the increase in an exemption for smaller businesses. I think that's a really key thing to do to raise that threshold so that we're not forcing small business owners to do needless paperwork to pay just such a small tax on their gross receipts. And I do support an upward adjustment. It's the magnitude in one calendar year that troubles me. I agree with all the comments tonight that 150% was far too draconian, but to say that it's quote-unquote only going up by 50% is still pretty steep. Compare it to how long it would take to hike property taxes at 1% each year, as we're proposing tonight, in order to reach the impact of a single 50% bump. Even if we'd started at 1% increases in 2004, the last time it was adjusted, we wouldn't even be close to 50% yet, 10 years later. 50% is a lot. Imagine if the cost for a pizza went from $10 up 50% to $15 for a meal. That starts getting pretty expensive. Consider this too. B&O is a tax on gross receipts, so that means the state and the city will collect whether or not a business owner collects any profit. A 50% increase will need to be absorbed somehow, and if you're operating on thin margins, the cost must be passed on to your customers. And as we know from economic theory, a higher price point can affect demand. And for a city that has routinely prided itself on economic vitality, a lower demand for our manufacturing, our services, our retail, etc., is not something I want to see happen. If we take a more measured approach, there will be some additional cuts to make in the budget, Or we can reforecast sales tax and building permit fees to match recently historical growth levels. It can be done without going up to 50% this year alone. I also believe we should take more time to study the effect of a B&O increase and how to best reach appropriate levels. Look at what we just went through between deciding 5% versus 3.5%. That's just a small difference concerning the technology fee, and the debate we just had about what level we each believe is best. So, it took us that much time just up here on the dais to talk about 1.5%. I think we could take a little more time to talk about 50. That number was arrived at because, as has been mentioned, it was an even, fair number across the board for all the categories, and I really appreciate that suggestion that was made during deliberations to move the line back, but there really wasn't an additional methodology behind it other than it was a round number and it was even-handed. Just to say we're getting closer to other cities in the state doesn't help us much either, because a fair number of East Side cities, such as Kirkland or Bothell, don't levy a B&O tax at all. Now, don't ask me for what amount we should pick on the spot, because I believe we need to take a little more time for careful reasoned study on the issue, and it involves doing a little bit of math. But I will say that if we had just a little lower number, I would say perhaps a hill, not a mountain, I'd be right there on this with you. Thank you.
Councilmember Barber.
Thank you, Mayor. This has been a very difficult piece for me to be working through. As many of you know, I'm a past business owner in this community for a very long time, and understanding that small pieces do affect business strongly, and this is just one of many of those additional fees and costs that have been affecting business. King County has been passing them. Now, if we go forward with this, healthcare costs are an enormous cost addition to a lot of our small businesses. One of the good pieces in here is that it does remove a lot of the small businesses from having to pay any of the B&O pieces, but they were very minimal dollars, but it will save paperwork basically for both sides of the column, for us and for them. I've heard from, and we've heard from a number of the business people who came in who operate on very low returns. Some of our car dealerships, Darigold came in and was talking in regards to going from $200,000 to $400,000 for Darigold. The car dealerships who operate on a very small margin, this does affect them. So you just add all of those costs on top, and it does become difficult to stay in business and do business. You always have to look at how you're going to offset these additional costs. Do you increase costs on the price of the goods sold, as we just heard, or do you lay off somebody or trim something else that you've been doing in your business? One of the good pieces on this is that it did eliminate the 2017 second bump, and it did lower prices, or the first increase, but it lowered it, as we heard, to 50%, which is still very high. This is difficult. Sometimes businesses take a look at what we pay to the city and what we get in return, and traffic in town is getting just incredibly difficult for people who want to come and shop in our community to come down, especially during certain hours of the day. All in all, it's difficult for me to sit here and increase any more cost of doing business for us in Issaquah. Thank you.
Any other questions or discussion before we vote? All those in favor of adopting ordinance number 2724, amending chapter 5.04 core model ordinance and 5.05 administrative provisions for business and occupation tax of the Issaquah Municipal Code, amending section 5.04.050 to increase certain tax rates, amending section 5.04.100 to make specific exemptions from the tax, amending section 5.05.050 to increase the thresholds for filing returns and when taxes are due, providing for possible referendum, signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Those opposed?
Nay.
Nay.
That is 5-2 with Councilmember Barber and Councilmember Scher opposed. Moving now to Agenda Bill 6907, Parks and Recreation Resident/Non-Resident Fee. That also is coming before us from Council President Winterstein.
All right, thank you. So again, this is a topic that this council is very familiar with. We addressed it during council deliberations. And as was summarized in the title or in the description, that is that this would authorize, again, by updating our city code, adding a subsection, allowing for adding a provision for charging non-residents a 20% increase in fees for park programs, and it would start sometime, the date uncertain to me, but it wouldn't be January 1st due to already published schedules and costs for existing programs. And it would be adopted in the next round of programs that are published for sign up. So I'm going to move that we adopt ordinance number 2725, adding a new section 3.59.020E to the Issaquah Municipal Code, authorizing the mayor to increase parks and recreation fees for non-residents.
Second.
And moved and seconded. Questions or discussion? Councilmember Scher.
Thank you. I feel like we're continuing the night of 1,000 taxes here. But, you know, this one is one I struggle with a tiny bit, and I'll tell you why. On the downside, it sounds very provincial. We talk a lot about being a regional player, a regional partner, and wanting to bring in people from all parts of Puget Sound to come to our community, and then we go ahead and slap a fee on folks who want to use our Parks and Rec program. But by the same token, those folks don't have to pay the same taxes and share that our residents do for those programs to be initiated and maintained in the first place. And what this really comes down to for me is I look at it with the analogy of a softball league I play in. And I used to play in our league, and then the scheduling just didn't work out this year. But the league I play in now, you have to be a member of the community center that runs the league to get the reduced rate. And if you're not, you pay a higher rate. And I look at it the same way. You know, if you're a resident, if you're a quote-unquote member, although it's a little harder to become a member of Issaquah, you have to actually live here, and that takes a little bit more than just joining a community center, but it's the same principle. If you live here, you get the benefit of your membership, of your residency. And, we're not talking about slapping, thousands of dollars on somebody to come and play softball or use our pool or, take advantage of these programs we offer. It's a fee that's fairly commensurate with other jurisdictions. But I will point out, and I mentioned this in our budget deliberations, that if there's any way to approach other jurisdictions to work out any kind of reciprocal deal, I would fully be in support of taking a look at that option where perhaps residents of other cities who charge Issaquah folks a fee would be willing to waive those fees if we did the same for their residents in those cities. And some kind of reciprocal ILA or agreement could be something that could be analyzed as a way of offsetting this and saving some costs for people who want to take advantage of Parks and Rec programs. But all in all, I think on balance, this is a justifiable increase. Thank you.
Other questions or discussion? I know there was considerable discussion during the council work sessions and deliberations. Are you ready to vote on the ordinance? All those in favor of adopting ordinance number 2725, adding a new section 3.59.020E to the Issaquah Municipal Code, authorizing the mayor to increase parks and recreation fees for non-residents, signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Those opposed? That carries unanimously. Moving now to Agenda Bill 6 925, resolution to increase the property tax levy for the city at a rate of 1% over last year, and ordinance setting the levy rate ordinance. This also is coming to us from Council President Winterstein.
Thank you. The City Council held a public hearing on November 3rd, 2014 on Agenda Bill 6861 on revenue sources for the 2015 budget, including consideration of an increase in property tax revenues. The hearing was held pursuant to RCW 84.55.120 that requires all taxing districts that collect property tax levies other than the state to hold a public hearing on revenue sources for the taxing district's coming year, in this case 2015, budget. Legal notice was properly issued, setting the November 3rd public hearing. In regards to the property tax, the city is restricted to increasing property taxes to the lower of the implicit price deflator, or IPD, or 1%. For 2015 budgeting purposes, the IPD is 1.64%, which means the limit factor is 101% of the property tax collected in prior years, plus new construction, annexations, refunds, etc. The difference between the limit factor of 100% and 101% is $75,111 in property tax collection. The council directed administration to develop the appropriate legislation for the adoption of the property tax levies for general purposes with a 101% increase, as well as the voter-approved levies. So with that, now there's two separate motions here. So I'm going to make one, and I assume we're going to act, and following, if that passes, we'll follow up with a second motion. So my first motion is to approve resolution number 2014-21, confirming an increase of the property tax levy for the city regular property tax for 2015 at a rate of 1% over the previous year.
It's been moved and seconded. Questions or discussion? Councilmember Scheer, followed by Councilmember Milligan.
Thank you, Mayor. You know, at the last meeting when we directed the preparation of this ordinance, I looked at whether or not, you know, this was a good idea to do this based on the overall budget as we were going to proceed on that. And, you know, it seems like every year, at least every year I've been on the council, and I don't know if it's ever been different, we either go 0 or 1. It's binary. We don't ever consider anything in between. And you can. It's 1% is the cap under state law by initiative. It's not the end-all be-all to say we're either going to go to 0 or 1. And I certainly recognize that the implicit price deflator is above 1%, and so it is justifiable in that sense to go to the maximum because it's 1.64 this year. It's interesting, there was one year a few years ago when it was actually negative during the recession, but we didn't bring it down. We just stayed at 0. And, you know, this year we're looking at going to 1 again. And again, I think it's justifiable in the sense that there is economic recovery. We talked earlier about the need for cities to get revenues in a very challenging time when the state may not be able to fund us appropriately. One thing I read about today that's of interest perhaps to our residents is that apparently Puget Sound Energy is likely going to be giving a refund to over 1 million ratepayers in the Puget Sound area in the next coming months based on some property that they sold in Jefferson County or some stuff they did with their utilities there. So households are actually going to get back approximately $40 in the next couple months. And that's, I think, a rare example of a utility or a rate where you're actually going to see something back in your pocket, because it always gets paid and it never comes back, and it always goes up and it never comes down. You know, I think in light of the fact that we have increased the B&O tax so significantly this year, in light of the other increases that we've done here this evening, I would be inclined to give our residents a break and not go quite as high as 1%. I think if it's voted in, again, it's justifiable, but it just, again, it feels like the night of 1,000 taxes, and that doesn't sit well with me.
Councilmember Milligan.
Thank you, Mayor. I just wanted to ask a question about how the agenda bill is written, detail that I'm still not clear about. Diane is still here, thankfully. In reading the agenda bill, it talks about the $75,000 increase in tax collection, which is the number that we discussed in our deliberations. However, when you read under the administration's recommendation, it says the alternative is if you don't, the loss is $185,000 in tax revenue, and I'm wondering how I can lose so much more than what I was expecting to gain. Did I say that right, Diane? You know where I am?
Yes. So there are two pieces to the property tax. The first piece is a resolution to increase it by either IPD or 1%. So you do a resolution to approve that. And then secondly, you have the property tax levy, which is composed of the 1% increase over revenue that we collected last year, plus the value of new construction that that is coming onto the rolls this year. So it's a two-piece. If you look at the ordinance, it's broken out with the regular property taxes, new construction refunds, and in the regular property tax levy is the 1%. In the new construction is what we're assuming to be the additional new construction value plus refund. So if council chose not to do those, it's revenue loss, and those taxpayers coming onto the rolls with new construction would simply pay no property taxes.
Any other questions or discussions? Councilmember Martz.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. One of the things that we discussed in the work session is I talked about the fact that if you look at the aggregate tax load around the country and you look at it by state, most of the states cluster between 10 and 12% of total incomes in the state being applied, whether it's through sales taxes or property taxes or various tax mechanisms. And so you have states in the South, which are low tax states, they're down to 10%, and high tax states are 12% or a little bit higher. But the fundamental job of governance is about police and fire and parks, and it always will be. And so you have certain mechanisms where you can try to keep up with costs. And it is this weird thing that in our state, we have very few levers that we can pull. And the reason that the state is about to get very bleak on the revenue that it returns back to us is because its levers are, in some senses, even more constrained than ours. And so, the levers that we have primarily are B&O tax and this very, very small circumscribed property tax. And when we were growing, the way the property tax works is when you're growing, you can basically get a lot of new revenue as this new growth comes into your tax rolls. But when you start to stabilize as a mature community the way we have, all of a sudden your revenue stream from property tax looks a lot different. And so that's why we're facing where we are today, and that's why the B&O tax is going up, and that's why we need this 1%, and that's why I'm going to support this 1%. And by the way, I want to point out, Director Marcotte, in her presentations in the work sessions, did a really great job of showing, for those of you in the audience at home, if you're wondering what our tax load per capita looks like, what the cost of services are for the city, there's a really good presentation that shows us compared to other cities on the east side, and I'm confident in saying that even with this increase, we are very good stewards of the taxpayers' hard-earned money. Thank you.
Thank you. Other questions? All those in favor of approving resolution number 2014-21, confirming an increase the property tax levy for the city regular property tax for 2015 at a rate of 1% over the previous year, signify by saying aye.
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 Those opposed?
Nay.
That carries 6-1. Council member Scheer in opposition. President Winterstein. The second part of that?
Just a moment, I inadvertently closed my document, so hold on. I would move to adopt ordinance number
2726.
2726, levying the general taxes for the city of Issaquah for the fiscal year commencing January 1, 2015, on all property, both real and personal, in said city, which is subject to taxation for the purpose of paying sufficient revenues to carry on the operations of the city for ensuring year as required by law. For the ensuring year as required by law.
Second.
It's been moved and seconded. Questions or discussion? Then all those in favor of adopting ordinance number 2726, levying the general taxes for the city of Issaquah for the fiscal year commencing January 1, 2015 on all property, both real and personal, in said city, which is subject to taxation for the purpose of paying sufficient revenues to carry on the operations of the city for the ensuing year as required by law, signify by saying aye.
Aye. Aye.
Those opposed? That carries unanimously. Moving to our last item for action this evening, Agenda Bill 6920, the 2015 budget. Council President Winterstein.
All right, thank you. So the preceding, was it 5 bills, all pertained to items that are already reflected in this budget. We considered potentially changing one of them when we considered a different technology fee, but given that bill passed as presented at the 5%, it doesn't. I talked earlier about a potential adjustment to the budget to account for that change in revenue, which no longer is necessary because we didn't decrease the revenue in this proposed budget. So I'm just going to read a prepared statement. The administration's proposed 2015 budget was filed with the city clerk on October 6, 2014, and Mayor Fred Butler presented the budget to the council at the October 6, 2014 council meeting. The city council, along with administrative staff, held 4 budget work sessions on November 9th, 14th, 16th, and 28th. In addition, a public hearing was held on November 3rd to present estimated 2015 revenue sources, including proposed property tax levy. State law requires that the City Council requests that a public hearing be held prior to the adoption of the final budget. Notices of this hearing have been published in the Issaquah Press, and copies of the budget have been made available to the public at City Hall and on the city website. The Council then held a 5th budget workshop on November 4th, 2014, where we deliberated on changes to the proposed budget, and changes were made and included herein. So I'd like to move to adopt ordinance number 2727, adopting the final budget for the city for the fiscal year commencing January 1st, 2015.
Second.
It's moved and seconded. Questions or discussion? Councilmember Pauly.
Actually, I just want to make a comment. We received a lot of information via email over the last 2 weeks from supporters of Arch, and Arch has a line item of support in this proposed budget. One of our council goals, as I was reminded today, is to get a report card on our progress towards affordable housing. And I was concerned that maybe there should be additional discussion now about the line item for Arch, but in light of the fact that we're going to do kind of a comprehensive review and allow more council discussion in the first quarter of next year. I'd just like to add that I don't believe the current line item is sufficient towards moving us towards meeting our goals. I don't believe our progress has been sufficient, but I'd like to see the data on it. I'd like to see the report card. And I'd just like to mention to my fellow council members that based on the results of that report card, I would like the council to consider changing the funding mid-year next year if our report card demonstrates that we are not funding it to a sufficient amount, and if a review of our revenues coming in indicates that we can afford to do that. I really think we ought to be looking at the $50,000 line item.
Other questions or discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor of adopting ordinance number 2727, adopting the final budget of the city for the fiscal year commencing January 1, 2015, signify by saying aye.
Aye. Aye.
Those opposed? That carries unanimously.
So,
moving now.
I just would like, before we move off this topic and move to, I think, go to the order, which is next, I did want to just say a few comments. We wanted to do it in 4. We took 5, and I'd say with tonight we took 5.1 sessions to work through all of this. And I also want to recognize publicly the contribution that your staff made during the deliberations. Your support was exemplary, and you were very responsive to our questions and concerns. The information you presented was pertinent to our needs and accommodated a thoughtful and deliberative process. So please accept my sincere gratitude for all those who contributed to the process this year. Thank you.
Thank you very, very much for those comments. I was in a unique position this year. This is the first year in 15 years that I was not with you during budget deliberations. But thanks to the persistence of Council Member Martz, they were televised. And so I watched every minute of budget deliberations from the comfort of my living room on TV. And I would, people ask me a lot of times, what kind of a council do you have? And I was thoroughly impressed with the leadership that our council president shown and the participation of all of the other council members in your deliberations, how serious you took those, and the give and take and the discussion that I observed on some tough issues in a tough budget. And I commend you for that good work, and so that at least during my first year as mayor, there will be a budget on January the 1st where expenditures are less than projected revenue. So thanks to each of you for your involvement in that process and for your leadership, Paul. So with that now, moving to good of the order, I believe I heard from Councilmember Martz that you had a couple of items that you wanted to share with us from Sound Cities Association.
I do, and I just want to bring them up for your so you can look at them, and I'll want to come back to them in a couple of weeks prior to the next PIC meeting. So you should have all received the very large packet that goes out ahead of every PIC meeting, and there's a number of potential action items in there, but there's really only a couple that I would categorize as contentious. And so over the next couple of weeks, I'd like you to take a look first at item number 11, which is Sustainable Public Health Funding Board of Health. This is to bring back the following proposed policy position. Sound Cities Association recognizes that public health services are needed to ensure the health and safety of all of our residents. SCA supports increased statewide funding for public health through additional revenue streams dedicated to public health. These sources may include, but are not limited to, taxes on e-cigarettes / vaping devices with funding dedicated to public health. This is likely to happen, and sort of the question is, do cities want to be supportive of it going forward, or do we not? There was a healthy amount of debate that involved phrases like syntaxes and things like that. So what I'm asking is that if you would all take a look, and like I said, in 2 weeks, I will ask in good of the order if we can discuss these a little bit, because there was not consensus in the room there, and I'm not sure there would be consensus around the table here. So I'll be eager to hear your thoughts on that. The other one, which is a much larger issue, and is far beyond our ability to decide, we 7 or we 8 here, but item number 12, lifting the 1% property tax cap. Potential future action to bring the following policy position back. While cities understand and appreciate property owners' concerns about rising costs and increased property taxes, in some jurisdictions the current 1% property tax cap has created an ever-widening structural gap between revenues and the cost of providing needed services to residents and making prudent investments in infrastructure. SCA therefore supports legislation to lift the 1% property tax revenue limit. This is, of course, in our platform that we support, that we have given to Doug Levy to work on for us. However, some of the issues around this are that you could lift the 1%, but you could do things like, is it municipalities only? Are there potential additional restrictions? You could say 3%, right, instead of 1%. You wouldn't necessarily have to open the floodgates to whatever any municipality wanted to go. You could do things like population growth plus the cost of living. And I'll also mention that there was talk of something about the state considering going retroactive on this, which would have financial implications that would really sort of change what this would look like to potential taxpayers. So all these things I would again ask you to take a look at over the next couple of weeks, and please be ready to give me your thoughts at good of the order in 2 weeks, so that I can go back to pick with our collective view on this. Thank you. That concludes my report.
Thank you. Councilmember Winterstein.
Oh,
I'm sorry. Councilmember Pauley, then Councilmember Winterstein.
Thanks. Just a quick item on Eastside Fire and Rescue's Personnel Committee. So we did meet, and right now one of the items that the Personnel Committee is looking at is the Fire Chief's performance evaluation and the Fire Chief's contract. An item that came out of that, the informational item that came out of that, was that last year for 2014, the board did not set goals for Eastside Fire and Rescue, and on the chief's performance evaluation, there are a list of initiatives that he undertook. This year, as Eileen mentioned, the board is going to have a retreat in January. One of the exercises they've asked us to contribute some information to is a goal-setting process for 2015. So I can get some sample goals from previous years and a list of the fire chief's draft initiatives and put them out via email. But then at the next council meeting, I'm not sure if good of order is the right place, but I can collect that information and put it together, but I need to be sending something back into Eastside Fire and Rescue in December. Some draft goals from our city that we'd like to see included that would be discussed at a January Eastside Fire and Rescue retreat.
Thank you. Now, Council President Winterstein.
And really, and both Councilmember Martz and Pauley, we do, in a week from tonight, have a work session scheduled. Now, there's only 3 hours of agenda items scheduled, so we've got a whole extra hour to work with. So I just wanted to remind you of that. Another item, too, is I was reminded that, I didn't need a reminder, there were no election of council seats this year. So in an effort, there has been a practice of the Issaquah City Council in such a year, since we know who all 7 of us will be back here in January, in other words, is to move forward to December the election of president and deputy president for the purpose of really getting the council committees and regional boards and committee appointments set as early as possible, so that we can start the year with everybody on their own, especially the council committees, and the schedules for those council committees can be set as early as possible. So that, at least that was the justification for why it's done when all 7 council members are returning. So I think we're going to be looking at handling that then in one of our regular meetings in December, the one on the 15th, I would assume. So I just wanted to bring that to your attention. And then the other item I had is that this Thursday, the 20th, is the deadline for applications to apply for any of the regional boards and commissions that are appointed by, or I should say committees, that are appointed by the Sound Cities Association. You should, has everybody received those emails from SCA? They know what the list is. And, you know, this is really pretty critical. It was an observation a couple years, well, maybe a couple years ago now, that there are many items, especially, I'll put transportation at the top perhaps, that are decided at a level way beyond this city. It's only through our participation in certain regional committees, also transit-related issues, where a lot of policy and the direction of dollars is affected, and by members of this elected body and other, perhaps the mayors, and maybe even opportunities for staff members to be active in some of these arenas, that we can really make a difference for the city of Issaquah. And I had this conversation with Mayor Butler during a leadership meeting a couple weeks ago, and of the 20 or so boards and commissions that committees that SCA appoints, here are those that it's at least our read that may be of most strategic value to Issaquah. Those being the Board of Health, the Economic Development Council, of which we already have representation on there. So, and I think you are a permanent member of that as mayor, right? So, yeah. And so there's still an open position to be appointed for that. So whether a member of this council could be appointed when we already have a member or not, I mean, good luck. The Growth Management Council, or GMPC, the King Conservation District Advisory Committee, and I should say that Tola is on GMPC and Mary Lou is on the King Conservation District. Now, both of your terms are up, so you would have to reapply if you want to stay on those. The King County Consortium Joint Recommendation Committee, which I'm on, and my term is up. And the Puget Sound Regional Council Executive Board, which Mayor Butler is a member of. The Puget Sound Growth Management Policy Board, upon which we do not have a member. The PSRC Transportation Board, the Regional Policy Committee, and the Regional Transit Committee. So these relate to health, funding for affordable housing, such as the JRC, growth, transportation, policy, and the information provided by Sound Cities in the application booklet that they sent out, unfortunately, didn't have any of the plans for those committees for 2014, or excuse me, 2015. They only had 2014 information. I made a request to SCA today, and just this afternoon I did receive, they did update, and now I have available to me the information for 2015 for each of these boards and committees, and I will forward that to you. I think it was Tola, you already received that, and perhaps we can distribute that to everybody else. So I would, I'm going to consider a different board or commission, potentially in addition to. I know, and of course we have an accounting of what everybody does, both as a council committee and what we do outside of this. And I would ask that though we all make a significant investment of our time and our attention already, and that if it is all possible for the benefit of our citizens, for you to give even more. In participation in these, I think it would be for the long-term benefit of the city, and I'm especially keen on matters related to transportation. So again, those applications are due on the 20th And if you want to discuss any of it with me or one-on-one or have any questions for that, just please let me know. Thank you.
Is there anything else for good of the order this evening? Seeing none then, we are adjourned.